Thanks so much for rejoining us today. I'm Jen. We've met. I'm the manager of the Career Development Services at the ANCC. I'm joined here today by Wendy, who's been helpful making sure everything happens, and Rebecca. Rebecca's going to be managing the chat and interrupting me if there are friendly interruptions. If there are questions, that would be a great fit to ask during the session. We are expecting a closed captionist as well, so hopefully soon you will have live closed captions, but in the meantime, we have the Zoom closed captions, which aren't bad. Again, I don't think they're quite as good as a real live person, but they're not bad. So I do encourage you to turn on those closed captions and take advantage of the opportunity to really follow along. And as you can see, we are recording. So if you do choose to unmute to engage in the chat with me, please do keep in mind that it is going to be on the recording on YouTube, and those recordings will be posted early next week. All right. And there is one activity that we're going to be doing. You can find it in the shared drive, the Google Drive. I don't know, Rebecca, do you have that handy by any chance to share the link?
The Google Drive?
Yeah, that would be helpful. So just to throw that in the chat. We don't need it this. Thank you. We don't need it this very second, but it's just something to have available so that you've got it around. So I'll just wait for these last two folks to come in through the waiting room. There we go. So again, you will need the networking ABC activity, but you don't need it just this second. And I wanted to share this. I had thrown it in the chat. It's also posted in the PowerPoints that are in the Google Drive, and I just updated it a couple of, an hour and a half, 2 hours ago. So if you downloaded an earlier version of these slides, you won't have this in there, but if you download a new version, it'll be in there. I really liked what Dr. Casciaro was talking about with regard to feeling powerful when you can give something as part of a networking relationship. And that really resonated for me because I think there's a lot of truth in that. That being able to give, it sort of increases your power and reduces the yuckiness that you might feel around networking. So this was a great article. It's 17 things that make you fabulous as a fresh grad. So if you're not sure what makes you fabulous as a fresh grad, there are 17 ideas that might be helpful for you. So the alternate title for this session is actually Humans Wanted. And the reason the alternate title is Humans Wanted is because right now we're living through a weird time that was actually already coming. There was already a lot of remote work happening. There was already a lot of remote teams, companies that span the globe. So there were already lots of people who were separated by geography and were connecting with people, with each other, with their coworkers via technology. So that isn't new. We just very abruptly took it to an extreme to keep each other safe here in Canada. This is actually not a new expression. Humans Wanted is actually an expression I've seen in recruiting now for a number of years as more and more technology comes into use and companies start spanning greater distances, and that piece about being a person, being a human, and being good at developing relationships, even with your coworkers, which you might think would be natural, but it does take some effort. Is actually a really helpful thing. And so I'm going to tell you some stories today, and hopefully some of them will make some sense, and you'll do some reflection on your own network. I was inspired by this talk. Some of you may have seen it. If you have, let me know in the chat. She's lovely. So Tay Selassie is an author, and in her TED Talk, which you can watch anytime, it's a really nice TED Talk. She talks about how we have rituals and we have relationships. And those two things really struck me as powerful for explaining networking, explaining how to network and sort of how I feel about networking. And thankfully, it sort of fits with what Dr. Casciaro was going to talk about, because I didn't know exactly what she was going to talk about. And so again, I highly recommend this TED Talk, and think about the idea again of rituals and relationships. The question that she asked in her TED Talk, if you've seen it or if you'd like to watch it, she challenges the usual question. So as she identifies as a Black woman, And she currently lives in New York, but she doesn't have a New York accent. And so people will sometimes ask her, and we ask each other all the time, where are you from? Okay, so it's a question that she gets asked, especially in New York, because she doesn't have a New York accent. And she realized in trying to answer that question that she struggled because she grew up in many different places all over the world. And she's got lots of friends who likewise grew up in different places all over the world. And so she actually proposes in her talk that a better question than where are you from is where are you a local? And I really like that idea, is where are you a local? Because that can be very, very meaningful, right? Like, do any of you have any feelings about being from Scarborough? Not just Toronto, Scarborough, if you're from Scarborough. Anybody? You're welcome to unmute yourself or kind of have the chat box open. I'm kind of proud of the fact that I live in Scarborough now. I'm not from here, but I now consider myself a Scarborough local because I've lived here long enough. You know, I feel like I'm kind of local. I don't have the, you know, the street, the cred that some people have because they were born here, but I am familiar with it. And so if we think about this question in the context of networking, where are you local? It can be a little bit more meaningful because it includes things like your neighborhood. Again, saying I'm from Toronto. Well, those of us who live in Toronto know that saying you're from Toronto doesn't mean anything. You know, you could be from anywhere from Port Union to Etobicoke, you know, or Mimico. Like, what does it mean that you're from Toronto? There are people from like Aurora, like way up north, you know, that's technically New York region, and they'll say they're from the greater Toronto area, but I definitely don't think of Aurora as being anything connected to Toronto. So the idea of where am I a local actually asked me to consider sort of where do I have the most relationships? And I really like that. So I'm sharing an example. If you wanted to analyze for yourself, you could draw yourself a simple chart here. You don't have to, it's just something I wanted to show you. So I currently live in the Scarborough Town Center area. So that's one place that I'm a local. I have other locals though. So for example, my school. So previously I attended Queen's University and McGill University. Most recently I attended OISE, the Faculty of Education for U of T. I currently work at UTSC, specifically the AANCC. You could say maybe that I feel local in the Student Affairs Department specifically. I'm not sure if I feel local at UTSC, maybe recently. It took me a long time to get to know everybody because it takes a long time. And then I'm local in communities of practice as well. So of course, I'm a counselor, so I feel like I have, I'm a local in communities of practice related to counseling and also career development. Those are professional associations. CERIC and CCPA are both professional associations and learning organizations that I sort of have some affiliation with. So when I'm at their events or engaging with them, I feel kind of local because I know a lot of those people, right? So again, if you think about rituals and relationships, right, which is what Tay focused on, these are where I have rituals and relationships. And those rituals and relationships are really important for networking. So why does this matter? So in terms of what we talked about day one and this morning, we've spent a lot of time talking about networking. I'm curious, what's standing out for you so far? I've given you this idea of rituals and relationships. I've given you this idea of where am I local? Dr. Casciaro talked this morning about giving, you know, as making networking feel a little better. I'm just curious, what's standing out for you? There are no wrong answers because it's just what's standing out for you. You can throw it in the chat or raise your hand. Rebecca, is anything standing out for you? Oops.
I can tell you what's standing out for me for sure. In the talk this morning, what I thought was so amazing was how she focused on how networking could really be meaningful for you and not this kind of thing you need to resent doing, and or I have to do it, it's an obligatory thing, but I really don't want to do it. But instead flip it over and look at it as an opportunity, something that I can do, a way to meet and connect with people and build relationships and learn about new opportunities. So just that mindset shift.
Yeah, I like that notion of prevention versus promotion.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I was honest in the chat box in case anyone missed it. I said I actually scored 12 and 11, 12 for prevention, 11 for promotion. I have a really hard time thinking of networking as a tool for my own promotion, except that actually as her talk went on, I realized I might have ranked myself a little bit differently if I were to take that again. Because as she talked, I realized, oh yes, learning. I really value the learning that I get from talking to people. And is that promotion? Is that career development? I guess it is, at least in our field, Rebecca.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Hearing all those career stories is really, really valuable for us. I often describe myself as professionally nosy. So it's a good thing that I'm a career counselor. Any thoughts jump out for anyone?
Joyce is saying, yeah, it may seem scary at first, but people are generally happy and friendly to help you with their experiences. Couldn't agree more, Joyce. Absolutely, they are. 99% of the time, people love chatting about themselves.
True story. You'll notice I'll spend a lot of time chatting about myself in this workshop. All right. Feel free to throw some more reflections in the chat. I'm perfectly happy having two streams of thought. I really enjoy having the second stream of thought in the chat, which is why I usually perpetuate it in sessions, but I'm a little busy here. So you saw these slides yesterday. If you were here, in case anybody missed it, Elin went over these in Job Search Essentials. So when we are candidates, and I do say we, when I am job searching, which hasn't been lately, but when I have been job searching, honestly, this is how I prefer to job search. Yes, the career counselor prefers to do job search this way, which is looking at ads on the internet or looking at ads on an employer website. Why do I prefer that? It's low effort. I can do it in my pajamas. There are computer systems that will actually email me job ads that I can look at and possibly respond to. And I'm really good at tweaking my resume, which is what Derek was talking about this morning. So I can tweak a resume really quickly and shoot it off, because I've got lots of practice at it. But it's not the most effective thing I could be doing. And I know that, right? So most employers, and again, if I put my manager hat on like I did yesterday, because Elin lost her internet, on just the perfect slide, actually. So if I put my manager hat on, I know from my experience, I would rather hire people I know or who I know by reputation. So one of the ways that, if you don't mind me sharing, Rebecca came to be here is that she and I have worked in many of the same organizations, never together until being here, but I knew of her reputation. She's a published author and I've admired her work. So, we knew of each other, even though we hadn't necessarily crossed paths. And I think Rebecca might have been a teacher of mine way back when she was a teenager.
Yeah, I wish.
So was I, right? So, for myself, when I'm a hiring manager, I know I would rather start with people I know or who I know by reputation, which is where that referrals piece comes in, right? I've heard about this person and they sound like a great person. And I told my dirty secret in case you missed it yesterday. I teach people to write resumes, but I don't like reading them. When I'm hiring, I really don't. And we identified yesterday, it was a student just like yourselves who came up with it. It's risky to hire someone off a piece of paper because a piece of paper is flat, it's two-dimensional. Whoops. A piece of paper is flat, it's two-dimensional, and it could mean anything. And I know because I've actually worked even as a resume writer, a hired gun writing people's resumes for them. I know I can make anyone sound good. And so, what's on the paper can be misleading, which I know because I have attempted to mislead employers on my clients' behalf sometimes. So this might be a good time to take out the networking ABC exercise. I will share the formal one on my screen. Rebecca had popped the Google Drive link. I don't suppose you still have that copied, so you can copy paste it, Rebecca, because I noticed a few people joined us after I think that got posted.
Yep, just popped it in again.
Thank you. So one of the things that's really helpful when networking is starting with referrals. Sorry, I should go back to that slide for just one second. So one of the things that's really helpful when you're thinking about starting about your network is to start with actually right here, looking for referrals, people who can give your name to someone for an information interview. As Dr. Casciaro talked about this morning, you don't necessarily have to ask for a job. Asking for opportunities to learn is a great way to meet people. As Rebecca said, people love talking about themselves, talking about their work, talking about what they're proud of. And so at the very least, asking for an opportunity to learn can turn into some magical things sometimes. So this is an activity we'll spend a few minutes doing, just to start thinking about who you are. And I'm sorry it's not writable, so you might want to, I'm not sure what the best way for you to handle this is. It might be that if you have a piece of paper, just to draw a piece of paper with 3 circles, the inner circle, the outward circle, and the outer circle. And the idea is, there's some detailed instructions here, but the idea is really to start thinking about who are your super trustworthy people. Who do you know would go out on a limb? Who would donate blood if you needed it, if you were a match? Who could you count on to come to you, in some of your darkest hours? Often these are family members, right? Might be best friends, friends that you've had for either a long time or friends that you've known more recently, but for whatever reason have a deeper relationship with. So these are the people that would come to your aid if you needed aid. So you might want to scribble down again: mom, dad, aunts, uncles, hopefully brothers and sisters would donate blood if you needed it, if you were matched. Again, best friends. And remember that they have a network, right? So that's where the outward circle comes in. And please do be working while we're talking, if you don't mind. I promise I'll get quiet for those folks who prefer quiet in a minute, but I want to get through the explanation. So remember that those people, especially your aunts and uncles, they friends and coworkers, right? If your aunt is married, obviously then she's got family-in-law, right? That could be, a part of your network. And you could certainly ask her, because she would donate blood if you needed it, if you were a match. Certainly. So she would donate blood. Heck, she would introduce you to her spouse's cousin, right? For an information interview, especially. Again, if you're asking for an opportunity to learn, why would anyone say no, right? The answer might be a not right now, right? Sometimes that's a common answer. Again, especially with COVID, a lot of workplaces are still kind of experiencing chaos. So some workplaces might have to say not right now, but follow up with me in 6 or 8 weeks, and then I might be able to have a chat with you. That's great. Because a no isn't often always a no, right? A no is often a not right now, not this second. Follow up with me later, and that's okay. So again, so think about who might be in that outward circle. Hopefully you've got some ideas going on. Oh yeah, like my aunt, my uncle who's married in, has this family member here. Don't they work for IBM? Maybe I could get a coffee conversation with those people. And it's easier to ask for a coffee conversation than to ask for a job, right? Even your inner circle, they might not be able to get you a job, right? Because there are all kinds of political things in workplaces, and there has to be a need for your skills, and there are all kinds of complications that happen, right? So if you go asking for a job, sometimes there just isn't one to give you, right? So even your inner circle, as much as they want to, they just can't. But information is free, right? Stories are free. Advice is free. Inside scoop on an organization is free and available anytime. Anyone can make the time to give it to you. So the information that you can get can actually improve your applications. And true story. So yesterday, Elin shared in her presentation that unfortunately, it takes about 100 resumes to get a job offer in normal times. I'm really not sure what it's like right now. It'll be interesting to see what research studies say. So about 100 resumes sent out to get a job offer. If that's all you're doing is sending resumes, it's a lot of resumes. There was a really interesting study that found that it only took 6 information interviews. Now, an information interview is what I've been talking about, just one of those coffee chats where you're asking someone for information and advice, and saying, can you coach me? Can you tell me about trends? I'd really like to learn more about what you're doing. That costs them nothing, right? Except a little bit of their time, which if they say yes, obviously they're willing to give you. And they don't have to say no, because if you said, do you have a job for me? The answer, might be no. And no one likes to say no, I should say. There are probably a few crusty people who enjoy saying no, but most people don't like to have to be put in the position of saying no, right? But could you spare 15 minutes or half an hour to tell me about trends in your company? Yes, that is, maybe not right now. Can we follow up in a month or two? Great, that's totally doable. So again, think about who's super close to you, who might be in that circle just outside of there. And you might not know who's in the outer circle just yet, but as you start working your way outward into these connections, you will start figuring out who's in this outmost circle. So again, if your aunt married a gentleman whose brother happens to work at IBM, okay, so now that brother, who's really no relation to you, but is going to be friendly because, you're close enough to family, he'll spend some time with you. And then maybe, during your conversation, he might say, you know what, my coworker I'm just going to make it up, I do data analysis, but my coworker in marketing is a fabulous person. And I think you should have a coffee with them because it sounds like you have all these, video editing skills from your podcasting and your YouTube channel and whatever. So would you be interested in having a chat with her? I can arrange that, and that's how you start, developing, those connections. And there's some really interesting research that shows, again, these 1 in 6 information interviews are helpful. And there's some really interesting research from sociology. I don't know if we have any social scientists in the room. Feel free to self-promote in the chat. But from sociology, there's this notion of something called strong ties. That's your mom, your dad, your brother, sister, your best friend. Strong ties and weak ties. So weak ties would be, again, like your aunt's husband's brother's coworker. Kind of getting into like your dog walker's sister's neighbor's friend. I start getting it. But funny enough, it's your weak ties that are more likely to help you get a job. Isn't that weird? You would think it would be your mom, your dad, your best friend. Funny enough, that's not what happens. That research was originally done in the 70s and it's been repeated pretty much every decade since then. And that's what happens. So it is worth the trouble. I can tell you from research in sociology and in business psychology, which is what Dr. Casciaro was talking about this morning, to work your way from that inner circle of people, again, who would give blood if you needed it, to that outward circle, and then be asking for referrals into that like next layer of people. And again, you can just ask for information. The magic that happens is you're all U of T grads, or will be soon. You're all smart. They're going to see that you're smart. You're going to make a good impression, right? You're going to come prepared on a little piece of paper with some questions, just like I have my little notepads here by my computer. You're going to have questions ready. You're going to ask some smart questions. You're going to make a good impression. And hopefully they'll stay in touch with you, or at least they'll remember you, so that when something happens, when they have a need to hire someone, they'll say, oh yeah, who is that person? Who is that recent grad I met from U of T? Because I can tell you as a hiring manager, what happens is I don't think I need anyone in terms of like hiring a new staff member Until suddenly I do, because Rebecca has quit on me and she starts a new job next week and she needs a few days to get ready for it. And now I need a career counselor like now, you know. So, no, very few managers actually know when they're going to have that kind of a human resource emergency. So that's when I'm thinking, okay, who do I know? Who have I had information interviews with? Who have I had coffee with lately? I am always doing information interviews because I never know. Rebecca might quit on me. But when someone, might, want to try something new, and I'm never going to hold that against anybody. But it means I have to think quickly and figure out how I'm going to make sure that you, our students, continue to get served. Right? So I'm always doing information interviews. Again, if I'm going too fast, please say something. You can unmute yourself. You can put your hand up. You can comment in the chat. So students often tell me they feel like networking off campus feels weird. And I think, again, going back to my TED Talk that I'm recommending, I think it feels weird because it's not local. So another strategy, okay, so we're moving away from the networking circle, although some of this might relate, moving on to other strategies, one that I'm calling become a local. So think about where you already feel local. Right? So you might have a part-time job or just like a whatever kind of job, a surviving job, or you might be volunteering, or you could take a part-time job or a whatever job, or do some volunteering in something relevant where you have the chance to maybe learn a skill or meet people. And I think to some extent that's what Dr. Casciaro was talking about when she talked about the woman who worked her way up to the operations head role at the company that owns Cinnabon. What she did was she was working in a crappy job, but she put in the time to volunteer to do things that were relevant, that would give her a skill and would let her network. So she was already local and she was making herself valuable. Another place that you might learn to feel local is at a conference, because you might feel local because the topic is familiar to you. So if you're a geography student, if you're going to a conference on urban planning or a conference on GIS, Geographic Information Systems, if that's something that's of interest to you, then you might feel more local because people will be talking about nerdy stuff that you're interested in being nerdy about. Leisure activities are often great places where you're actually already a local. And of course, team sports are really hard right now because of COVID, but definitely there are art classes happening online where there might be chances to connect with people. Cooking classes. I have personally attended an online cooking class. And it was fun to talk with the other people. Well, we're all totally useless at we were making wontons, and the first 10 were terrible, but then I got the hang of it. Really sad about hair salons being closed. Hair salons are actually great places to be networking, because what do you do for 40 minutes? While someone's cutting your hair as well, you talk, right? And so hairstylists are actually great connectors of people. And so I'd encourage you to, once they reopen, spend some quality time with your hairstylist, because they are great connectors. So again, thinking about places where you could already be a local, that might, that might make you feel more comfortable, because you're always going to have something in common with someone that you're talking to, again, at a job or somewhere you're volunteering, or again, engaging in a sport or some kind of a class. You're always going to feel like there's something that you can connect on, and then eventually get around to talking about work, right? And they might say, oh, so someone in your cooking class might say, if you're chatting during a break, oh, you know what, my brother works in whatever. Send me an email and I'll see if he'll have a chat with you. Right? Why not? And again, this is one of those cases where a weak tie would possibly turn into something interesting for you. Small talk. So speaking of those breaks in your cooking class, where you might be looking for opportunities to have small talk. One way to improve your small talk actually came from this fun article. I'm not sure what the original source is, but there's a link there. And I really liked these ideas, especially this first one. Asking for stories seems like a really great strategy. It's something that I do as a counselor. Is I'll ask for a story instead of a one-word answer. So, for example, if I ask the question, "How's your day going, Rebecca?" you could answer it with,
Yeah, it's okay.
exactly, 1, 2 words, right? I'm not really going to get much. But if I ask you, "Hey, Rebecca, what's the highlight of your day so far?" What's the shortest answer you could give me?
I ordered a pizza for lunch and it was really delicious.
See, but that's already a story, right?
Yeah.
Oh, pizza for lunch. So what's your favorite kind of pizza? You know, right? So all of a sudden we have a conversation. Another strategy from this article was avoid mirroring. And again, we do this a lot in regular conversation. Someone says, "Hey, it's a nice day." And so we naturally respond, "Yeah, it is a nice day." And where do we go from there? there's nothing to build on. Whereas, I mean, you don't have to say something silly like this, although it will get attention. You know, if someone can say, "Hey, it's a nice day," you could say, "Yeah, Godzilla movies also usually start on nice sunny days." And it's a bit of an extreme example, but again, the idea is to say something that's not just a copycat of what the person already said. Because I mean, if I said something silly like this, that's probably going to start a conversation about movies, or maybe movie monsters, or maybe just how I'm weird. That's okay. And similarly, avoid giving unexpected response, right? So it's hot today. Yeah, really hot. You could actually say, "Yeah, with global climate change, maybe today is actually a cool day in relative terms." We don't know, right? And again, you're guaranteed to get into a conversation about climate change. Contextually, it would make more sense to use this kind of response at an event where people are probably going to be interested in talking about climate change. But it would be guaranteed to turn into an interesting conversation at a bus stop. Hopefully not a hostile one if you have a climate change disbeliever in your midst, but it could happen. But again, the idea is just to shake up how we usually have conversations kind of mindlessly and see what happens, and maybe get into a chat with somebody. All right, so I'm going to share, it looks like I have time to share these. Before I go on to sharing some stories, are there any thoughts or questions? And you can throw them in the chat. You can put your hand up. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, here's a comment here from Priya. Or I'm not sure if it's a question or comment. I can't read the whole thing on the screen yet. Since most of the employers for the networking event are recruiters and not the actual position, I'm interested in, would they still know information about other positions we actually want to learn from and are interested in?
They'll probably know a little bit, absolutely, because they have to talk about those jobs when they go out and recruit. Again, not as ideal as talking to someone who's actually doing the job that you want to get into, but often these recruiters are the right kind of people to start to develop your relationship with in those organizations. Because again, if you make a good impression on them, they can give you hints and tips on like how to approach the manager on LinkedIn, to have a coffee chat. That's part of the LinkedIn conversation tomorrow. But you can use platforms. Well, Elin talked about it yesterday, right? You can use platforms like 10,000 Coffees and LinkedIn to reach out to people. So it definitely doesn't hurt to talk to these recruiters. And again, they can't give you depth necessarily on these jobs, but they'll be able to tell you some things for sure. And I actually had a private chat. Someone's wondering if I have tips on how to reach out to maybe a professor who I haven't talked to in a while to ask if they have volunteer positions. And I'm a big fan of rekindling old relationships. So that's a great question. I would start by reminding them, how you knew that professor, right? So, "Hi, Professor so-and-so. I don't know if you remember me. I always sat in the front row of your class, 3 or 4 semesters ago and asked questions about whatever." Again, however they might remember you, or "I was always in your office," whatever it was, however they might know you. And then acknowledging COVID is usually a good idea these days because research has been really impacted negatively. Everything's been impacted negatively, but research has been impacted negatively by COVID. And just to ask you, like, how's your research going? I can imagine it was impacted by COVID. Are you looking for any volunteers or employees to help things get restarted? Let's see what happens. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Any other thoughts or questions?
What questions can we ask recruiters about other positions?
Oh gosh, what can't you ask? I mean, they'll tell you what they don't know for sure. So if you hit the limit of their knowledge, you can tell. I would definitely encourage you to ask things that that they would probably know, like day in the life. Right? So let's say you're interested in data analyst kinds of roles. You know, you could ask, so what's a day in the life of a data analyst at IBM? And see what they say. I can also ask them what a day in the life is of a typical IBMer, because there's definitely a company culture, you know, at certain organizations, and so some of those things may be more typical.
Okay, here's another question too from Jane. When networking later, should we more so focus on common interests and making nice conversation? Or since we don't have time, should we mention our professional life and ask about theirs?
Yes, so given the nature of the event tonight, because it's really tight, and unfortunately when we're online, we really have to structure things a little bit more than when we're in person. I would skip the small talk tonight, yeah, this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and jump straight into the, you know, here's what I'm all about. Please tell me about your organization. And yes, which is going to be a little uncomfortable because usually in-person conversations, we have the small talk. You know, it's a social lubricant to like smooth the way for the conversation that follows. That's a little more serious. But yeah, for these purposes, yeah, I would suggest skipping the small talk and go straight to career talk, which is going to feel really uncomfortable, and I'm sorry about that. If you came yesterday to the alumni networking event, I definitely felt that as well. I was like, wow, we really have to get into the personal stuff really quickly. Okay. But it's just kind of the nature of online networking. Networking is one thing I'm really looking forward to doing again in person. It's not bad online. I like it better live. So I'm gonna start telling my stories. Please feel free to again, put your hand up or ask a question or make a comment in the chat. I'm hoping these stories are helpful. Students often tell me the stories are helpful, so hopefully you'll be able to take something away from these. So I want to tell you about two people. The first person I want to tell you about is Dr. Butler. I still can't call him Brian, even though he has not taught me since 2003. What's that, 18 years ago? And I still can't call him Brian. He's retired since he doesn't even teach anymore. So he is a cognitive/educational psychologist who taught me at Queen's University when I was a bachelor student. And in fall 2000, I failed his stats class. Yes, there is life after failing a class. Many of you may know that. So I failed his stats class. In my defense, most people failed his stats class. They actually had to bell curve it to save us all. Probably the only time I'm aware of that the psychology department at Queen's bell curved anything. So thankfully, most people failed, and I just passed because the way programs work at Queen's, it's not like at U of T where you request your major after you take some courses. Queen's does it the opposite. So I started in psychology, and they were going to kick me out of psychology if I failed this class, which I did technically. But on the bell curve, the minimum grade to go on was 70%, which is much like getting into psychology at U of T, right? You're supposed to get 70% on the first two psych classes. So thankfully, on the bell curve, I had 70 exactly. So I was allowed to go on. And then in 2002, 2003, Dr. Butler supervised my undergraduate thesis. And that might be surprising. I include these details because I'm guessing that for some of you that may be surprising, that I would fail his class, but then he would supervise my undergraduate thesis, which is a lot of work on his part, right? Why would he do that? Well, it's because he saw potential. I'm not going to pretend I didn't cry. I did. I have never failed a class in my whole life until I failed his stats class, and it was awful. But I went and talked to him. I think my eyes might have still been red. I probably looked pathetic. But I went to his office during his, there were a lot of us at his office during office hours, just before the announcement that they were going to bell curve it, to find out what we could do. You know, most of us were asking, like, is there an opportunity for extra credit? Can we write an extra exam? Like, we were willing to do anything, you know, to try to make up the difference. Obviously, whatever I said, despite looking pitiful with my red eyes, he thought there was potential there. And I can tell you why. I was that irritating kid at the front who always had my hand up. I was always the one with a question. I was always the one who, when he wanted feedback, is like, any thoughts or comments? You know, I was going to make something up, you know, because, you know, I wanted to get the most out of my class. And I think he saw that. I have lots to thank him for. And again, this is just a networking story. So it was actually him. So here's something I can really thank him for. He introduced me to the field of counseling psychology, which is my current field of work. Counseling psychology actually has no presence, still has no presence at Queen's University. It's a very clinical psychology department, much like U of T, Scarborough. There's some, through the mental health studies program, there is some counseling presence, but we are also a highly clinical department. So I had never heard of counseling psychology. So that made a big difference to me in terms of my career, that he was able to make me aware of this whole field of counseling, of which I had no awareness before I graduated. And he actually wrote my key reference letter for grad school. So he helped me get into a master's program, which is, of course, to be a counselor in Ontario, you know, it's best to have, if you want to be a general counselor, you sort of need a master's degree. If you're interested in addictions counseling or counseling or behavior therapy with children with autism, things like that, you know, those very specific college programs that you can take. But if you want to just be a general counselor, then they kind of need a master's degree. And then a number of years later, he encouraged me to pursue a doctorate. And funny story, he promised to apologize for the failed stats class if I did my doctorate. So he apologized in November 2019 when I finished it. But throughout all of this, so for 20 years, I've known Dr. Butler, still can't call him Brian, and he's been a really important advisor and mentor and part of my life. Yeah. And so he's just an interesting part of my network. He's not someone who I expected to have in my network, but he is. And I value the time that he gives me. And obviously he gets something out of our relationship. I'm not sure what it is, but he wouldn't continue to stay in touch with me if he didn't. And the other person I want to tell you about is Felicity Morgan. So Felicity is the director of UTM's Career Center. She actually used to work for Scarborough campus, and prior to that, she actually did work at the downtown campus. So she hit the jackpot. She's actually worked at all three of the big career centers at U of T. And in 2010 or 2011, I actually couldn't remember the year, she didn't hire me. Okay. In 2010 or 2011, she interviewed me for a career counselor job at her career center at UTM. I really wanted it. I really liked her. She wasn't director then, she was the assistant director. So I really liked the woman who was then the director. I really liked everybody I met. I like UTM. It feels a lot like UTSC. If you've ever been out there, if we have any folks from UTM here today. I like that tight campus feel. I liked, the outdoorsiness. Again, looks a lot like Scarborough campus. And I actually have vivid memories of the phone call where she rejected me in the nicest way possible. But I remember the phone ringing, and I was at a different job, so I was trying to leave this other job. And so I stepped into the stairwell for some privacy, because otherwise I had no privacy at this workplace. And she told me that I was the runner-up. And of course I was devastated. And, I don't know what I said, but it was obviously polite enough that she connected with me the same day on LinkedIn. So it wasn't even that I reached out to her. She connected with me. And now that I'm a manager, I know why she did that. She said, okay, so Jennifer wasn't the right person this time. But people are always moving on, trying a different job, going to a different organization, going to a different campus at U of T. That happens all the time. So she said to herself, I may need Jennifer one day, so I don't want to lose her. So she connected with me on LinkedIn. And what's really funny is over the years, she kept offering me contracts, but I was always in the middle of a contract and I didn't want to burn any bridges. So I never actually did get to go and work with her over that time. And then when my current job was advertised in 2013, so I've been working at UTSC since 2013. When my current job was advertised, she sent it to me within half an hour of me seeing it. And she said, I should apply. This would be a good fit. And remember, she had seen me interview, right? She knew what I was like. So she said, yes, you should apply. This would be a good fit. And then, lucky me, she was actually on my interview panel. So usually for a job interview, in case any of you haven't had a job interview before, there's usually a couple of people, 2, 3, 4 people, who are listening to you talk, who are observing you, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, right? That everybody sort of sees and hears the same kind of things. And so she said on my interview panel, I felt like I had a friend, even though she and I hadn't worked together before, again, we just had a real good vibe about each other. So I felt really good going into that interview. And of course, I have no idea what was talked about during the post-interview conversations that the panel must have had, but in the end, I was offered the job. So again, it's a networking story because it's someone, I wouldn't call her my BFF. I don't think she would donate blood, she's not someone I would ask to donate blood if I was in an accident anyways. I wouldn't put her in like that inner circle of people. But she's definitely someone whose opinion I value because she's been there, done that for a lot longer than me. And we get each other, I don't know, we have a good vibe. And what's really funny now though, so now I've worked at UTSC since 2013. It's the longest I've worked anywhere. I know her team very well at UTM. And what's really funny is I now know she was right not to hire me. She was right. At UTSC, if you think about UTSC, we're a busy campus. We're a happening place, right? The hallways are always full. Classrooms are usually buzzing, when we're in person. There's always there's always something happening in the meeting place. Like there's always, activity. Same at the Academic Advising and Career Center. If you've ever been to our center, except during exams, it's usually a really busy place. People in and out and in and out. UTM's Career Center is very different. It's very quiet. It's in a quiet corner of the campus. The staff themselves are very zen. I would have made them crazy or they would have made me crazy. One or the other, somebody was going to quit, and so she was right. That wasn't the feedback she gave me on the phone because I did ask for feedback when she rejected me, back in 2010 or whatever. But she was right. But I was the right fit for Scarborough, which was really funny. So anyway, again, these are relationships that I have. I've sort of told you how they came to be. Were they perfect relationships? Heck no. Dr. Butler failed me. The first and only fail I've ever had. I've had some bad grades, don't get me wrong, but the first and only fail that I ever had. And, but we got through it. He role modeled open communication and talking about things. And with Felicity, again, she has told me she has given me some tough feedback before, and I'm grateful for it. So these are people who I'm grateful that I've met. And what's the purpose of these stories? You will find these people. I promise. It took me a while. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Dr. Butler, I found early. Felicity took me a while to find. But you will find these people who will be present. And they're helpful. And they have connected me to all kinds of people. Right. So these are people who have helped to connect. Yeah. Again, if there are any thoughts, feel free to throw it in the chat or Put your hand up.
I think one thing that occurs to me, Jen, is that when you tell
Yeah.
those stories, the thing is that we don't know at the time that we're meeting those people. You didn't know with Dr.
Right.
Butler. You had no idea you would still know him, and the same with Felicity. But
Yeah.
that just shows the reason for not giving up on relationships like Dr.
Mhm.
Butler, for continuing on with relationships, continuing communication like you did with Felicity. It just really backs up that idea of it really pays off to take the time to maintain these relationships.
Thank you. That's way more articulate than what I was saying. And I do want everyone to take a look at Dr. Butler's picture. He looks kind of wicked there, and he really is. He is wicked. Maybe that's why he and I like each other. So to come back to the TED Talk that I led with, and I do encourage you to watch, it's a very good TED Talk. Let's talk about rituals for maintaining relationships. Because again, two of the things that Tay talked about were rituals and relationships. And this goes back to that question actually about prof that you haven't talked to in a long time. How do you keep someone from becoming someone that you haven't talked to in a long time? So I'm a big fan of developing rituals, develop routines, habits for keeping in touch with people. It could be weekly, that might be a bit excessive. Monthly, again, might be a little bit excessive, but definitely special occasions, like twice a year would be like New Year's in Canada Day. Again, it depends on the kind of relationship and what's going on in your lives. Newsy emails are sometimes nice. And if you keep it generic, you can send it to a few people. You could actually request advice, especially if you're feeling like you're at a crossroads in your career in some way. So definitely encourage, asking for guidance. I am a big fan too of old-fashioned cards in the mail. I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can see this one up here. They're just so much nicer than emails because like I do keep thank you emails, but I file them away. I don't really print them. That's just not something I do. So I file them away and I don't see them, like they're not out there for me to see. Whereas when I get a card, and believe it or not, sometimes students do, give me a card when we're in person. I really value them and they go up on my wall. And I have a cork board in my office. So I really do value those. And I don't think I'm the only person who has that experience, right? I won't print a thank you email. There's nothing wrong with a thank you email. I mean, like an email is better than no communication, absolutely. But there's something really special about like maybe once a year. I still send Christmas cards. Christmas is a holiday that I do celebrate. And so I try to send Hanukkah, Christmas, and what else? I'm trying to remember what other holidays are happening around. I'll send New Year's cards to people who I know celebrate neither of those things. Around that time, just because that's my routine is once a year, doing that kind of thing. Because there's something just really special about this thing that's going to hang around. And then LinkedIn. So another ritual that I've developed, and I would encourage you to develop, is regular posts on LinkedIn. So you call it passive, staying in touch on LinkedIn. And I actually linked, if you download the PowerPoint, I actually linked one of my thoughtful articles. It's not shameless self-promotion or anything. I want to give you real examples, okay, of things that I have, of things that are useful and things that got reactions. So if you go look at that article, it got all kinds of reactions on LinkedIn. And I don't share that again as look how good I am at social media. It's people read it, or at least they read the headline and maybe skimmed it or something, it kept people up to date. No, I have a huge audience on LinkedIn. I have over 1,000 connections. So, that was like a real, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks kind of update for everybody. But I will try to post a few of those a few times a year, so that my professional colleagues, have a sense for what's going on with me. And I'll send more specific things again to people who are really close to me. At Christmas is my habit, because that's when I have time, because December is kind of quiet at the ANCC. It's about the only time of year that's quiet, so that's why it happens then. Other ideas for updates and sharing on LinkedIn, which again is a topic for one of tomorrow's concurrent sessions. There are great tutorials out there, and there's some links again if you download the PowerPoint. those are some of the videos that I like the most. We have some videos as well that you're welcome to check out. And of course, you can either attend the concurrent session tomorrow, or we'll be posting the video recording of it. And I do want to acknowledge that some of you may not have bought into any of this, and that's okay. A common complaint that I get about the idea of networking is, I just want a job, and all this self-presentation stuff is baloney. All right. If you choose to make it feel fake, I would say it will feel fake. But if you, as Dr. Casciaro was talking about, and I hope I've tried to express, if you think about networking as opportunities to meet people that maybe you could be making a friend. I actually really liked how someone asked that, like, how is networking different from making a friend? Like, kind of not, except that with networking, these are going to be your professional friends who may become BFFs. I don't know. Like at the AA and CC, there are actually a few staff members who've worked together so long, they are actually friends outside of work. That can happen. I've actually worked in a couple of places where I became very good friends with a couple of the people who I worked with. So if you make it fake, it will feel fake. If you go into meeting someone saying, you know, maybe you could be my mentor. Maybe I could be your mentor, right? Maybe I can teach you some things, right, from a younger person's perspective. Because we're hiring humans, as I started with, humans are wanted. Humans are wanted, and being human is the one thing that I'm really looking for when I'm hiring someone. I'm not hiring a robot. I'm hiring someone that I'm going to have a relationship with, possibly for a very long time. And so I think that's one of the big reasons that the networking thing really matters to hiring managers. So that's the end of what I wanted to say, except of course to say thank you so much to our sponsors, MBNA and TD Insurance. You'll have the opportunity to talk to some TD recruiters tonight, actually, not just from insurance.